At 84, Ann-Margret, the fiery redhead who once lit up Broadway's stages, now stands amid the ashes of her burned dreams to tell a story that sends shivers down the world's spine. Not Hollywood, but New York, the beating heart of theater, was where dazzling spotlights hid monsters in human form. In a shocking revelation, Ann-Margret has unveiled a blacklist. 5 men she despises most, once hailed as kings but who dragged her to hell with fists, words, and power. This is not just the tale of a star, but the raw scream of a woman refusing to be forgotten. We will count down this list, each name a blade tearing through the glamorous curtain of Broadway. Brace yourself, for the truth will burn away every illusion you ever held about the world of theater. In 1963, the Winter Garden Theater in New York trembled under the grandeur of a spectacular musical where Ann-Margret and Elvis Presley shared the stage. Elvis, with a voice that melted millions of hearts, was the icon of rebellion and allure. But to Ann-Margret, he was her first nightmare. Their love blazed like a frenzied dance under the stage lights. But when the curtain fell, Elvis revealed himself as a jealous tyrant. Loving Elvis was like holding a burning torch, she once said through tears. It was radiant, but it would consume you. They met during a rehearsal at the Winter Garden, where Elvis's gaze locked onto her like prey. Within weeks, he declared her his woman, but the price of that love was ruthless control. Elvis refused to tolerate any smile she gave to a male co-star. Once, when she casually chatted with a supporting actor, Elvis dragged her into a dressing room, locked the door, and smashed a mirror in front of her. "How dare you smile at him?" he roared, his voice trembling with rage. Ann-Margret tried to explain, but Elvis's hand struck her cheek, a slap that left no bruise but shattered her heart. The Winter Garden's backstage became her prison. One evening, in a fit of fury, Elvis shoved her against a wall, her shoulders slamming into a door frame. A lighting technician witnessed it, but was threatened into silence. The press, as usual, was fed a fabricated story that Ann-Margret was severely ill and needed a few days' rest. The truth? She wept in her dressing room, concealing bruises with thick makeup to keep performing. "I couldn't leave him immediately," she recounted. "Elvis was the king of Broadway, and I was just an immigrant girl trying to make a name." But Elvis's control didn't stop at physical violence. He made late-night calls, threatening to ruin her career if she dared leave. "If you walk away, all of New York will know you're just a Swedish whore sleeping with every director for a role," he once said, his voice cold as ice. Ann-Margret endured in silence, her heart turning to ash. By 1965, she mustered the courage to cut all contact. Elvis still tried to track her down, showing up unannounced at her performances, but she had warned security and never looked back. "I don't hate the artist Elvis," she said. "I hate the man he truly was, a person who wanted to turn me into a doll, never allowed to speak." If Elvis burned Ann-Margret's heart with his fists, Frank Sinatra, Broadway's golden voice, crushed her reputation with venomous whispers. In 1965, at an elite Manhattan party, Ann-Margret, then just 24, was swept into Sinatra's orbit, a man 25 years her senior with a mesmerizing voice and power that enveloped New York. Sinatra promised to propel her to the top, guaranteeing major roles in prestigious plays. But the cost of that promise was cruel manipulation. Their relationship began in secrecy, but for Ann-Margret, it was not love, but a gilded prison. Sinatra controlled her every move, from the clothes she wore to the people she could speak to. "I never truly loved Frank," she confessed, "but he had a way of making you feel you had no other choice." The nightmare peaked in late 1966 when Ann-Margret discovered she was pregnant. Trembling, she told Sinatra, hoping he'd share her joy. Instead of embracing her, Sinatra handed her a non-disclosure agreement and forced her to visit a secret clinic in Brooklyn for an abortion. "I begged him," Ann-Margret recalled, her voice breaking. "I said I could raise the child alone, that I didn't need his money. But he just took a drag of his cigarette, looked at me like I was an object, and said, 'Do it, or I'll make Broadway believe you're a Swedish whore sleeping with every producer.'" She underwent the abortion in fear and shame, in a dark room devoid of light. Months later, as she prepared for a new play alongside Sinatra, she was abruptly dropped from the project without explanation. "One day, I was a star. The next, I was someone no one dared touch," she said. Worse, Sinatra spread rumors that Ann-Margret had slept with mafia bosses to secure roles. New York tabloids branded her Manhattan's mafia sex puppet, causing her mother to collapse upon reading the headlines. "My mother fainted at the dining table." She recounted, "I wanted to sue Frank, but in the 60s he was untouchable, a friend of politicians, the kingpin of entertainment. Going against him meant destroying yourself." Sinatra didn't hit her, didn't need guns or knives. He killed her with power, with whispers at lavish dinner tables where no one dared believe her. In 1979, Ann-Margret took the stage at the Schubert Theater for Desire's End, a dark, ambitious play. But she never imagined her co-star, James Woods, would become her most horrific nightmare. Woods, with his sharp intellect and chilling smile, was beloved by audiences for his complex villain roles. To Ann-Margret, he was a silent monster, stalking like a vulture in the shadows. 3 days into rehearsals, Ann-Margret felt Wood's gaze slither over her body like a bloodied blade. "It wasn't jealousy or intimidation," she said. "It was a warped, icy desire that made me shudder every time I entered the dressing room." By the 7th day, she knew something was wrong. A fired lighting technician secretly slipped her a VHS tape. When she watched it, she froze. Footage of her changing clothes, removing her bra, wiping sweat, all recorded by hidden cameras. "No woman could watch that tape without trembling," she said. "It wasn't just my body exposed. It was my dignity, my privacy, my soul laid bare." When she confronted the director, he only bowed his head, trembling, and apologized. Eventually, she discovered Woods had installed at least 3 tiny cameras in the women's dressing room, 2 in the bathroom, and 1 in her personal trailer. The entire cast was stunned, but instead of going public, the producers paid for silence, canceling the play after 10 days under the false pretext of insufficient funding. Woods faced no lawsuit, no arrest, not even a mention. "I don't just hate James Woods," Ann-Margret said. "I fear him. He's a monster who didn't need to hit or shout. Just his gaze was enough to chill my spine for 40 years." The scandal was buried, but the trauma haunted her. Every time she entered a dressing room, she checked every corner, terrified that an unseen eye was still watching. "I thought Elvis and Sinatra were the worst nightmares," she said. "But Woods was a diseased shadow, always there, even in my dreams." In 1972, Ann-Margret stepped onto the stage of the Majestic Theater in New York to star in an ambitious action play titled The Train Robbers, directed by Sam Peckinpah. Peckinpah, a legend in the theater world, was renowned for his violent, blood-soaked works and an unapologetic disdain for women. To Ann-Margret, he was not just a director but a tormentor, determined to punish her simply for daring to say no. From the very first day, Peckinpah made his stance clear. "If you want to be a strong woman on this stage, you have to strip away everything, your clothes, your mask, and that glamorous star persona." He demanded that Ann-Margret perform a scene fully nude, claiming it was the only way to achieve authenticity. She refused, not out of shame, but because she wanted to be respected for her talent, not her body. "I've fought my whole life to escape the label of a sex doll," she said. "I wasn't going to let anyone steal my dignity." But that refusal marked the beginning of a silent campaign of torture. Every scene she performed became a grueling test. Peckinpah deliberately extended rehearsal hours, forcing her to stand under scorching stage lights for hours or demanding she repeat dangerous scenes unnecessarily. "I felt like a hunted animal," she recounted. "Every glance from him was a threat." The breaking point came on the 19th day of filming, during an action scene that required Ann-Margret to flee from a staged explosion. The script described it as a safe, controlled effect managed by the technical crew. But as the cameras rolled, she felt real heat searing her face. The explosion wasn't fake. It was far too large, too real. Flames licked at her dress, burning the fabric and leaving searing burns on her thighs and hips. She screamed, stumbling off the stage, smoke choking her throat, while the entire crew stood frozen in shock. Peckinpah, standing in the corner of the stage, only sneered. "Oh, I must have accidentally used real explosives," he said, his tone as casual as if discussing the weather. "You're weaker than Marilyn Monroe. If it were her, she'd have finished the scene and then killed herself like a real star." Ann-Margret was rushed to the hospital with severe burns and a shattered spirit. An assistant later revealed the horrifying truth. Peckinpah had deliberately ordered the use of real explosives to teach her a lesson for defying him. The producers covered up the incident, blaming the technical crew and refusing to investigate. Peckinpah continued directing, continued drinking, and even told the press that Ann-Margret was too sensitive to handle the pressures of the stage. "I don't hate him for burning me," she said, her voice trembling. "I hate him because he wanted me to burn. I hate him because, for years afterward, I couldn't take action roles anymore. He turned me into a walking shadow on the stage, no longer confident, only afraid." The incident plunged Ann-Margret into deep depression. She underwent nearly 9 months of physical therapy to heal her burns, but the scars on her soul never faded. When she returned to the stage, she still smiled, hiding her pain under thick layers of makeup, but the carefree spark in her eyes was gone. "Broadway doesn't forgive the weak," she said. "But I wonder, why do the strong have to pay such a heavy price?" The final name on Ann-Margret's blacklist is Steve McQueen, the king of cool, a masculine icon who captivated Broadway and millions of fans. With his deadly smile and rebellious gaze, McQueen was every woman's dream. But to Ann-Margret, he was a toxic storm, cloaked in seductive charm, but harboring the heart of an abuser. "Loving Steve McQueen was like living with a loaded gun," she said. "He was charismatic, brilliant, but pull the wrong trigger, and you'd cease to be yourself. They met in 1970 at a lavish party in Greenwich Village, New York. Ann-Margret, then at the peak of her fame after the play, Carnal Knowledge, was drawn to McQueen's loneliness, fresh from a broken marriage. Their connection was like a beautiful explosion, but rotten at its core. Within 3 months, McQueen began controlling her, demanding she reject any role involving intimate scenes with male co-stars. "If you want to kiss someone else on stage, go sleep with all of Broadway," he once shouted, smashing a wine bottle against a hotel wall. Ann-Margret endured, believing her love could tame the beast within McQueen. She was wrong. The most horrific night came on March 14th, 1971, at a luxury hotel in Times Square. After a party, McQueen flew into a rage when Ann-Margret refused to attend a dinner with his new friends. "You dare embarrass me?" he bellowed, his eyes bloodshot with alcohol and fury. She pushed him away, trying to escape the room, but McQueen struck her chest with a brutal punch, sending her crashing into a steel railing. Not stopping there, he grabbed her hair, dragged her into the bathroom, and threw her against the wall with the force of a former motorcycle mechanic. The result was 2 broken ribs, a cracked left jaw, and severe bruising on her back and hips. Ann-Margret was rushed to the hospital in shock, but when the doctor asked what happened, she only said, "I slipped." She knew that telling the truth would destroy her career, not McQueen's. "I loved Steve," she confessed. "I believe my love could change him. But when love turns to fear, that's hell." After that night, Ann-Margret cut off all contact. McQueen tried to reach her, even showing up unannounced at theaters where she performed, but she alerted security and refused to meet him. "I didn't want to see him again," she said. "Not because I hated him, but because I was afraid I'd never escape that shadow." McQueen, with his invincible aura, continued to shine on stage, while Ann-Margret carried invisible scars for life. Ann-Margret, born in Valsjöbyn, Sweden, arrived in New York at age 5 with dreams of becoming a star. She achieved that, becoming a 1960s theater icon, dubbed the red-headed Marilyn Monroe. But Broadway's spotlight was no paradise. It was a gilded prison where she was trapped between violence, betrayal, and power. Elvis Presley, Frank Sinatra, James Woods, Sam Peckinpah, and Steve McQueen. 5 men, 5 knives that turned her from a star into a victim. They beat her, manipulated her, secretly filmed her, burned her, and crushed her reputation. But Ann-Margret did not fall. At 84, she steps out of the shadows, no longer a victim but a witness, a flame of justice. "I was once a decoration at a feast ruled by men on Broadway," she says, her voice resolute. "But today, I'm rewriting the menu. I'm speaking out so the girls after me no longer have to stay silent." She doesn't need another role, doesn't fear being erased from the Walk of Fame. Her name is etched in real scars, real pain, and no one can take that away. But is the story truly over? 5 names have been exposed, but what other dark secrets lurk beneath the stage lights? Ann-Margret, the unextinguished flame, has sparked a revolution. She's not just telling her story, she's paving the way for silenced voices. "Broadway was once my prison," she says. "Now it's a battlefield, and I'll fight until my last breath." Stay tuned, for Ann-Margret's fire has never gone out. And who knows, one day, another name may step from the shadows, continuing the story she began. Broadway, beware, justice is coming.